So hi, this is Luke Coty here with Flickwork, and I am here with filmmaker JS Mayank, and I got to know JS through a film, or rather a screenplay contest that I ran with the guy who runs the ISA, Craig James Petroviak, and JS had a script that he sent in to the contest, which was just a great sci-fi piece, and we loved it, and he was one of our grand prize winners, and we flew him out to Sundance. And I'm very pleased to have him here with us today as he is continuing on his journey to getting his film made. So welcome, JS.
Thank you so much, Lou. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, no, I'll tell you, sci-fi is one of those genres that is always been of great interest to me, and I think to a lot of other people. I think it just continues to get, with all the shows that have been on TV. I go back to, my son asked me the other day, what was one of your favorite TV shows, and he didn't, not the reference, he's not aware of it, X-Files, and before that Twilight Zone, right, and stuff like that really kind of. I think what sci-fi does, it has the ability to draw people into a story because there's certain things that are kind of the unknown, and that's just an intriguing place to start for writing a story.
Absolutely. I think one of the coolest things about sci-fi is the suspension of disbelief brings people in and it drops their guards. So you can talk about so many things that are deeper, but people would actually, it's almost like you can slip in the deepness, without them knowing. And I think that's why sci-fi fan base is almost more rabid than any other genre, because you can really explore some really cool things. And I think that's one of my favorite things. And God bless Netflix instant streaming for all of the Twilight Zone that I get to catch up on.
Exactly. I'm the same way. I mean, I think some people have called Netflix, reruns, but maybe in a derogatory way. But honestly, to me, that's one of the best things about it is there's such a world of stuff on there that you can discover and then you can consume so quickly that you really get a feel for it. So tell me, you're here with you were talking about your film EMIT, that obviously came to us as a screenplay originally. I'll say that I know that the key thing is EMIT is the word time backward, and that's kind of crucial to the ultimate aspect of your story. Tell us about what EMIT is about.
Yeah, so EMIT is basically just an interesting sci-fi look at a world where time flows backwards. So that's kind of the logic of the movie, that everything is the same. It's just we changed one key variable, which is time. So our story for this short film is about this old man who is awaiting to greet his wife, whose body is being exhumed, and as she's taken to the morgue and eventually the hospital where she's going to come alive. And we intersperse this with the old man's 7-year-old granddaughter who's coming to terms with her own upcoming mortality because she only has 7 more years to live. So it's this very slice of life look at a world where basically time is going backwards, so you don't have choices or free will. And I think that's a good comparison to our own lives, where you kind of see this world and then you can make your own choices in our world and see how things are different and almost better for us.
Right. So I'm going to get some of the tough questions out of the way early on, because we've all seen different stories that deal with time or time travel. Even one of my favorite early films when I was a kid, Back to the Future. I think people are attracted to stories about time because there's an element of, like a reset button or a do-over or more knowledge about something that being able to slide in and out of time allows people. So I think it's just an intriguing concept to people because at the end of the day, I think you've touched on something. None of us want to deal with our own mortality.
Right.
And if somehow time travel is actually available, we can maybe somehow escape that ultimate end. But so in your film or your screenplay, I know it's going to be a film, and we'll talk about where you're at with that. But in the screenplay, as you just described, the time is flowing backward, but yet there's some things that in a given time space move forward. So just one example is, at the opening of your screenplay, you have these guys that are exhuming the casket, and they're about to take the body to the hospital to bring her to life, but in that moment of time, there's things, things start at the beginning and they actually move forward because, nothing would get done if people were literally moving backward. So
right, exactly, yeah. So that's one of the logics of the story. Nobody's walking backwards or talking backwards. It's not. Everything isn't happening in reverse. It's just basically the flow of time is reversed. So it's almost like the cycle is turning backwards instead of forwards, and without giving too much away from the movie, but there's a very basic scroll at the beginning of the script, which basically describes that, my logic behind this movie was that the common theory about the universe is about the Big Bang. Matter began expanding, starting the unidirectional flow of time. That's kind of what the basic theory is. And what we're saying is, for our movie, that somewhere around the year 4031, time just stopped. And it stood still, and then eventually it stabilized and it began again, but with one exception, that it's flow reverse. So what I'm saying is that it's happened in, let's say, the year 4031, and we're back to the year 2012. So we've had about 2,000 years as humans to adapt to this new world, which is why nobody's surprised. It's like things have restored order in this weird amount of chaos. Right. There is some order. So I'm not picking the moment right after it happened. Right. I'm going 2,000 years later, where this world has realized how to function again. So that's where I pick it up, and that's my logic of the in the sci-fi.
Right, and as I read the script again, it kind of, and you talked about this on your Kickstarter page, but that you're creating a certain feeling, or like, in other words, obviously you're not going to go out there and do flyovers with a helicopter and show what the world looks like. I mean, that's really not the point of the film. The point of the film is, how do people deal with this reality of a reverse in a life experience, and then your ability as a filmmaker, you're going to have to bring the magic to kind of get people to just assume or to kind of accept the environment where you're telling your story.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, some of my all-time favorite sci-fi movies are ones where sci-fi is merely the backdrop, and then it's a very intimate human story. I mean, to take the example, my favorite movie is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and a lot of people say, oh, that's not a sci-fi movie, and I think it's absolutely a sci-fi movie. It's about somebody who is getting their, you can wipe their memories, and you can get rid of memories, but it tells a very human story. And, movies like Never Let Me Go or Children of Men, they're about this sci-fi concept, but they're focused on the characters. And I think with EMIT, that's the case. I mean, as much as I love movies about aliens and, spaceships and epic battles, this isn't that kind of sci-fi. It's very introspective and very character-based. So I feel like this will be sci-fi that'll be accessible to a lot of people. People who think necessarily, oh, we're not into sci-fi. I think if they gave this film a chance, they might really appreciate it.
Right. Okay. No, and I love how you characterize that it's, you've created the world, but it's about that human story. And I'm right there with you. I mean, ultimately, even though, and I am going to talk about Lost here for a second, because it's one of my favorite shows, and I know people talk about the ending. I love the ending, so I may be one of the rare people.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think at the end of the day, in that last episode, I didn't care. I mean, that's the power of TV, I think, and the characters they created, that I just wanted Sawyer and Julia to get together.
That's right.
Didn't care about whether it was purgatory or some in-between state. No, I'm Team Lost forever.
Yeah, right. And I'm just making the reference that they created this very cool world, and some people got caught up in Okay, how does the smoke monster do this, or where did that polar bear come from? And to me, it was we in our kind of pre-call conversation, we're talking about your script. You said sometimes there's mysteries that are there. That's okay. You don't need to figure everything out, but what a mystery does sometimes is it creates this milieu or this feeling of just. It kind of sets the stage for that human story, and then on top of that, when you have really good characters, then that is the combination to me that really gets me excited about a film.
I couldn't agree more.
So let's talk a little bit, because obviously this still is a script and it's not a film, and I want to talk about where you're at in the stage. Because first of all, as we sit here today on April 28th, 2012, your film is, I know it's about 90% funded on Kickstarter. I think you're trying to raise a total of $23,000. So I would just say to anyone who's listening to this, if it's still within 3 days from now, go out to Kickstarter and type in EMIT, EMIT, and you'll find JS's project and give him a little support there, because I really want to see this film made. And but tell me how it got to this point, because one thing, and I'm sure there's a lot of filmmakers or people that are just thinking, I want to make a film.
Sure.
How do I take a step? And the thing I was really impressed by is the amount of time that you put into crafting all the elements together, in what your background, the people involved background, and your connections into the industry. I thought you did that really, really well, because I think all things being equal, if filmmakers none of us would like to worry about money or how to get it or how to distribute our films. We want to have that creative process and play in that sandbox. But the reality is, we need to somehow get our mind wrapped around the business aspect of it. Certainly places like Kickstarter are making it so much easier to do that. But I just wanted to commend you on your, I'll call it the package or whatever, but it's very, very well done. And I just, if people go out there and look at this thing on Kickstarter, I think it's a great example of how to get people involved in the story and wanting to feel compelled to make an investment.
Thanks, Lou. Yeah, basically, I think one of the biggest things that gave me sort of a kickstart, no pun intended, was actually winning the grand prize and coming out to Sundance, because the fact that, I saw the enthusiasm, obviously from my own team. I knew that my producers and everybody around me who had read the script even prior to submitting, I knew that it was connecting with them. But once I talked to you, with Craig and everybody else on the Table Read, my screenplay team, and the actors, and listening to it, I really felt like this was something that was definitely connecting with people. So that was a huge bonus for me to get me motivated.
Awesome.
And right after that, I felt like if this is the response I'm getting just for a script, right, then I really should try making it a movie. And, I came back to LA and I sat down with my producer and I said, look, let's really see, what does it take to get this made? And I assembled my producers and we sat down and we kind of made a game plan. And I knew that I wanted to cut a teaser, because I know, like you said, all things being equal, you have to do something to stand out. Right. But I wanted to make a teaser without actually shooting the movie.
Right.
So I wanted it to be very much in the mold of how sci-fi conceptual, so that they can see that we have thought about this enough that we can do some cool things, but not give the story away. And with regards to where we are in the process, like you said, we're almost 87% funded on Kickstarter right now with 3 days to go. We really hope that people who are listening can, jump on the side and donate whatever they can and help pass the word around. But I also, I have a wonderful storyboard artist who actually did some of the boards for the Adjustment Bureau. So we've storyboarded the entire script. We got a casting director recently, so we're just making offers to a couple of actors, and we should have the casting process done in the next 3 to 4 weeks. Now we're basically starting looking at locations. We're hoping to shoot sometime in June. So, yeah, that's where we are at the moment.
Yeah, no, and again, just looking at the you mentioned your storyboard artist. So I was on a panel this week out at the Julian Dubuque International Film Festival, and I was sitting with, so John Fitzgerald, who started Slam Dance,
Right.
who is now doing a project called Cinecause, and a gentleman by the name of David Anthony, who's doing some neat stuff around streaming, and another guy by the name of Nat Mundell, who has got a unique take on distribution, on focusing on very niche markets. And what we talked about at one point was that it's necessary to start building your audience for your film before it's even made.
Absolutely.
And to me, that is actually one of the secret sauces of Kickstarter. It just brings so many benefits, and I'm not really meaning to be a whole thing about conversation about Kickstarter, but what it is, and this is what we're trying to do here with Flickwork. If you can get people like interested in your project prior to it even being made, now you've got a little bit of a fan base, or something that, when you say it hits a festival, or it's going to be shown online, or we're selling a DVD, you're able to go to those people right out of the gate and say, hey, we're done, buy it, and with Kickstarter, it's like a pre-sales engine. So you're creating your fan base as you're making your movie. And for people who love film, it's an endlessly fascinating endeavor. So if you're a fan of EMIT and like, oh, I can't wait to see the next storyboard, that in and of itself is content that people get excited about.
No, absolutely. I mean that's one of the great parts of it. I mean, we already have 73 people backing the project, which means at least 73 people who are down watch this movie that hasn't even been made. I mean, that's amazing for a short film.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that we're doing, that moving forward, all our updates, kind of some updates of the movie as we shoot, as we cast and things like that, those would be reserved for people who have backed us, in the beginning. So I think that really brings them into the process too. You can learn more about filmmaking and feel more connected to the process as opposed to, just being an outsider. So I think that's one of the great collaborative parts of this process that I'm finding is, putting up storyboards and getting comments like, oh, this looks great, or, I didn't really know that you did all this right before, so that's just a really interesting part of the filmmaking process that I'm, realizing.
What I almost liken it to the fact, like, it's almost like you get all these DVD extras before the project's even made.
Yeah, it kind of is. Absolutely.
And that's always been what it was one of my favorite parts of, but it's strange as we get away from DVDs, you consume that type of content in a different way. But that was always one of my favorite aspects of a new, from a filmmaker I really admire, like a Peter Jackson and Lord of the Rings. Watching those behind the scenes movies are always so exciting.
Absolutely.
I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but a couple key things, because I know there are people listening that look at where you're at, and even though you haven't, even though I'm sure you will, but even though you haven't kind of broken through and started making films with $1 million budgets, but like I said, I'm sure you will in the near future. But when you look at what you've been able to put together, and then you look at the fact that I'm reading through some more of your information, that you're represented by a company called Circle of Confusion, which is a pretty big Hollywood agency, and you seem like you're connected with some industry heavyweights. How did you get there? Like, because we've all read books and stories, and you're trying to figure out how to do something, and they say, well, I really wanted to make a film, and then when I finally got my $500,000 in funding, I went ahead and made it. It's like, whoa, how did you get the $500,000 in funding, or how did you get to know Steven Spielberg, or I want to hear that story. Right. So if there's a couple highlights to how you got from a kid that loves stories, how did you get to be the guy that has some contacts, got representation? How did that happen?
Okay, it's a funny story, because especially with my background, I was born in England, but I was brought most up in India, and so when I came to the U.S., I really didn't know anybody, so it was one of those stories where it's been a combination of, I think, luck and tenacity. And one of the biggest things I like to think of is if you don't ask somebody, the answer is already no.
Right.
So every contact I've ever made has kind of been like, if I'm at a place where I know somebody knows someone, or if I've met somebody who I admire, I always try to make an impression, and I ask them, obviously I wouldn't walk up to somebody and just be like, can you give me, $500,000 or give me a job? Right. No, but, well, one of the experiences I can tell you recently, I did my MFA from Loyola Marymount University in production, and when I was there, I started this thing called the Grad Society, and it was an avenue where, as grad students, it was just a student-run organization, and we would bring in industry heavyweights to come and talk to us, but not as a classroom setting. It would just be very informal. So we would call somebody and say, look, please come over, have coffee with 10 or 12 grad students. We won't ask you for a job. We won't, beg you to take a look at our script. Just come here and give us your advice.
Right.
And for that, I got people like screenwriter John August, who wrote Big Fish and Charlie's Angels movies. Craig Mazin, who just wrote The Hangover 2. We got DJ Caruso, the director of Eagle Eye, and we got Paula Wagner, the producer of Mission Impossible. Mark Gordon. I mean, these whole bunch of people, they would come over, and a lot of times the way I got to them was I would call their assistant, and I would be nice to them, and eventually I would get through. And one person actually, I got on the phone with them, and they said, how did you get through to me? Just the fact that you got through, I'll come, because you must have done enough right that my assistant is not going to get fired,
Right.
Because if they put through a psycho, they're going to get fired. So, I think just the fact that believing in yourself, being nice, like genuinely nice, be a nice, polite person. And I think being tenacious, just don't give up. I mean, because again, if you ask somebody something and they say no, okay, that happens. I mean, for every yes I got, there were probably 15 no's. But, it's like if you didn't ask, then it's a no anyway.
Right.
So I think that has been one of the biggest lessons. And, being in Los Angeles, I think that I will say the biggest advantage is if you want to work in this industry, maybe looking at coming here, because you never know whom you might bump into. And that really is one of those things where you could meet somebody and they'll turn out to be the assistant of somebody huge or something like that. And so a lot of my networking has kind of happened like that. And, you can meet somebody, but then you also have to make a good impression. So that's where your work ethic, having a good sample, good pitch, having, something to talk about. And that's where I feel like you previously appreciated the package that we put up for EMIT. Right. So it's similar things where when I do talk to someone, I do have a coherent, good, thought-out idea. I know who they are, what they've done. And I would say doing your research is also a very good thing for somebody who's looking to get into the business, to really understand that it takes a lot more than just having a good idea, to really be prepared to talk about the idea, to come in having thought it out and be presentable, and at the end of the day, be a nice person, because life's too short, as we talked in our pre-conversation.
Right, absolutely. Well, some of the key things that you said that really resonate with me is, it's one thing to be creative, and I think we've all been, because I've made a couple films too, and as soon as you tell someone that you've made a film, and like clockwork, it's like the person says, I have this idea for a film, right? And it's, you're polite and you talk to them, and this is, we're not the Steven Spielbergs of the world, and so you can imagine what those guys go through, and then why there's all those layers to protect them, because everybody wants to throw an idea at somebody. But I think, what you're saying is that ideas and creativity and, frankly, the desire to be a filmmaker or any career in this industry, it requires a responsibility on the person who desires that. Like you said, do your homework, do your research. I love your example of creating that organization at your school. it's like that is like going through the side door. You still put your work in, but now you've taken a creative solution to. It's not just JS Mayank calling to talk to Paula Wagner. It's this association at the film school, and it's legitimate, and it's sincere, and it's all of those things. But it's also a creative way to leverage what you know and how to do something creatively. And it's not just calling and say, "Hey, I've got a great idea for a script," because they get 1,000 of those a day.
Absolutely. No, and one of the things we did was, like I said, when we would call the guests, we would say, look, we promise you, you will not be pitched, nobody will beg you for a job, and all these things. And we brought in a couple of agents and managers, and what ended up happening was, by the end of it, when nobody had pitched to them, they would genuinely be impressed by the people, and they'd say, like, almost every time they would, at the end of it, say, okay, if any of you guys want to intern on our company, or you know what? I have 5 more minutes. Let's everybody give me a 20-second pitch, So it's just like, again, that's something that if you're nice and you play by the rules and, I will say always try to do something to stand out. Always lead with your biggest thing. So if you won a contest, when you're talking to somebody, don't walk up to them and say, hi, I won a contest. But, one of the first few things, because something I learned very early in my career that I learned from a mentor is he said, look, if you meet somebody like the Steven Spielbergs of the world, you won't have time for 2 hours to chit-chat for them to get to know you and then find a kernel of, oh, you never told me,
Right.
So in the first few minutes, if you can somehow work in either somebody they know that you know or something you've done that's of note, things like that, it just helps them drop their guard and feel like, okay, it's not just another person coming up to me. This is somebody who knows the industry, So if you say, a lot of times why people won't take unsolicited queries, if you're represented, then almost instantly they talk to you like, oh, okay, because I don't think there's any other difference other than the fact that they know somebody else has taken a chance on you.
Right.
That's all they want to know. So I think that's where some of those things become of note and matter.
Right. Okay. Very cool. Well, I could talk to you literally all day because the stuff that you're doing is fantastic, and I think EMIT is one project in your timeline, so to speak, right? But what really comes through is just your understanding of how someone looks at a career and takes it seriously, and you're owning it, right? You're not like buying a lottery ticket and saying you hope you get you're owning your career. And I think for people who are starting out or wanting to make a move into doing anything creative, I think that's the message that comes really through. And like I said, I'm really excited about the upcoming project. I know you're going to hit your goal. We'll share this out with some folks as well.
Right.
But I'd love to reserve the right to come back to you, and if we can get some updates from you as the project continues, I would absolutely love to have a follow-up conversation with you as you're maybe during production and after, and just kind of follow your journey. It would be great.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah, I would love to do that.
Fantastic. Well, JS, thank you so much for your time, and good luck, and we'll be in contact, and we'll talk to you soon.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Okay.